Chapter's bitter end. Golden leaves whispered their secrets to Harlem's streets, a muted jazz ballad from a distant club, lending a soulful heartbeat to the cool autumn air. The city, with its blend of burgeoning hope and raw realism, sang a song of contrasts. Pushing through the entrance of John Chapter's townhouse, I was met with a sight that made my heart skip a beat. The weight of Chapter's silent form pressed against the amber light filtering through his parlor window. The sun cast shadows that lent an eerie beauty to the grim tableau. Here was a man whose words once danced with vitality, now forever stilled. I caught a faint, almost imperceptible hint of musk, out of place and fleeting.
"You again?"
John Blackie's gruff voice came from behind. The detective's muddy brown eyes watched me, a hint of annoyance shadowed by resignation. I met his gaze, unfazed. When Harlem speaks, I listen, and right now, it's screaming. Those dark eyes of his, always weighing the world with their unique blend of weariness and determination, met mine.
"Did you know him well?"
He was a voice of Harlem. We all knew him, through his words. I surveyed the scene again, taking in every detail. The dimly lit parlor was filled with the trappings of a successful literary life. Rows of leather-bound books, awards gleaming from their places on the mantel, and photographs of Chapter with the luminaries of our time. Then my gaze returned to the man sprawled across the floor, bloodied from knife wounds too numerous to count. The walls were splattered with crimson, a testament to the violence that had taken place. He clutched a torn piece of paper in one hand. I crouched to look at it. It was part of a letter. A delicate dance of cursive on the paper hinted at passion, with a brief signature, Ella B. The absence of the rest of it whispered more questions into the growing dusk. I pointed it out. "You saw this?"
"Of course, we'll look into it."
But
we already have a suspect."
I inclined my head in a question.
"Marcus Taylor."
Taylor? I was surprised, and not. The two men were infamous rivals, but why focus on him? Blackie scratched at his rough chin.
"Neighbors report hearing Taylor shout threats at Chapter last night. Given the state of things,"
He gestured around the room,
"it seems he made good on them."
"People argue all the time, Blackie. Doesn't mean they commit murder."
"It's more than just words, Lanie."
I stood up, resisting the urge to challenge him further. One thing's for sure. Harlem's lost a voice today. It's up to us to find out why.
"Not us, me. Why do I always have to remind you of that?"
I met his gaze. Every story has layers, Blackie. Angles, and we both know you can't cover all of them. Blackie sighed.
"Harlem's full of stories, Lanie. This one's just a bit bloodier than most."
Blackie was one of the good guys, but his easy dismissal of the case sent a soft chill down my spine. John Chapter wasn't just any writer. He was an icon, a beacon of hope for aspiring artists. His work gave them something to strive for, something to believe in. And now he was gone, leaving behind a void that would be felt deeply within the community. Harlem's stories are its soul, Blackie. I looked at Chapter. And I intend to cover this one. Autumn's embrace had painted Harlem with russet and gold, the crunch of leaves underfoot accompanying my hurried steps. Harlem Jail loomed ahead, a cold, austere building offering a stark contrast to the vibrancy of life outside. A tantalizing scent of food, likely from a nearby diner, wafted through the air, juxtaposed with the penetrating dampness that seeped into my bones as I neared the building. Inside, an officer patted me down, a procedure so routine it felt like a strange dance we performed. But my thoughts were preoccupied. Marcus Taylor awaited and, potentially, so did answers. 2 iron doors and a thorough search later, I was in the visitation area. It felt stark, cold, and grimly efficient. A guard ushered Marcus Taylor in. Taylor's posture was straight, jaw set, but behind the bars of the visitation cell, his imposing frame seemed somewhat diminished. His dark hair, usually impeccably styled, was now unkempt and matted. However, his strong jawline was resolute, and his eyes, alert and assessing, tracked me as I approached. I settled on the worn wooden stool. "Marcus Taylor? Lanie Price, from the Harlem Chronicle." He shifted uneasily.
My attorney said not to speak to anyone, especially the press.
"Your attorney doesn't know me. I search for the truth, Marcus, especially when the hidden." He thought about it, then gave a deep sigh of resignation. After a sweeping glance around, he lowered his voice.
What do you want to know?
"John Chapter, you had issues with him." His snort was filled with bitterness.
That's an understatement. The man basked in the limelight with works that paled in comparison to mine.
He paused, inhaling deeply before leaning in.
Sure, we argued. I didn't think he deserved that last award. But murder? That's not me.
The sterile echo of our conversation sharply contrasted with the chaotic world outside. "You were at home during the murder?"
Sleeping.
"So, no alibi?" He simply shook his head. "I was alone." I persisted. "But you admit you threatened him?" Marcus averted his gaze, a brief moment of vulnerability evident.
In a heated moment, words can fly. I regret them, but they were just words.
I paused to study him, trying to separate fact from fiction, truth from lie. "Any clue who might have wanted him gone?" He frowned, clearly weighing his words.
If I knew, do you think I'd be sitting here?
I leaned back, the hard stool uncomfortable through my clothes. The room was filled with silence, but for our breathing and the faintest scent of stale coffee. "Harlem needs its stories, Marcus, and I need to know if you're the villain in this one." Holding my gaze intently, he said,
Not this time, Mrs. Price, not this time.
As I left the jail, his words and the fear I'd glimpsed in his eyes lingered in my mind. While Harlem's streets welcomed me with their familiar charm, they also seemed to murmur hidden truths, elusive yet palpable. The chill in the air felt more pronounced, the wind carrying with it the faint sounds of life, jazz, and murmurs. But for me, it was all drowned by the echoes of a conversation and the daunting task ahead. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee met me as I pushed open the door of Darlene's Fish and Fry. It mixed oddly well with the crisp, biting autumn air I'd just left behind. Soft notes of a jazz melody played in the background, giving the place an atmosphere that tugged at memories of past stories I'd written. Celeste Jennings sat alone in a booth. She looked vulnerable against the backdrop of the autumn colors outside the window. I needed some quotes from Chapter's acquaintances and thought I'd start with her. Word was she was the closest person to Chapter around. She was an up-and-coming writer, and her admiration for Chapter was well known. Her large, doe-like eyes met mine, holding a world of grief and memories. She began to tell me of the plans they'd had.
We were going to get married.
The gravity of her words, mixed with her shimmering eyes, spoke of a deep love for the victim.
We had this dream, you see, a novel written by both of us, a union of our souls in more ways than one.
A hint of musk wafted around her. It seemed to dance with her every move. "I'm so sorry this has happened," I said. "Thank you for seeing me."
Oh, no, not a problem. I'm glad you asked to see me. I'd like to help in any way I can.
I took out my notepad and held my pencil poised. "As you know, they've arrested Marcus Taylor. What can you tell me about his relationship with Chapter?" She hesitated, her fingers playing with the rim of her coffee cup.
Marcus was jealous, yes. But murder? I don't see it. He isn't a killer. His passion is for words, not violence.
Humph. That surprised me, that she'd defend the man accused of killing Chapter. So, you don't think he did it? She shook her head. Have you got any idea who might have then? She paused, thinking it over, then shrugged helplessly and shook her head.
It's just so hard to believe that anybody would have done this. I still can't believe it.
The hands holding the cup trembled. I felt for her and didn't see a need to draw out the interview. Who else should I speak to, Celeste? Someone who understands the depths and tales of Harlem's literary world.
Simon Caldwell. He feels the heartbeat of Harlem's book scene like no other.
I knew the name. He was on my list already. So, I asked her for another, but she said she had none to give me. As I left the shop, the damp chill reminded me of the countless stories lurking beneath Harlem's facade. Another lead, another thread. Celeste's rhapsodic expression when she spoke of Chapter was haunting. This was more than just a story. It was a tapestry of love and tragedy, and the investigation was only beginning. West 125th Street had an undeniable pulse, a rhythm I'd always found soothing. But stepping into Simon's bookstore was like entering another world. The noise from outside became a distant hum, replaced by the rustle of pages turning and the soft scratch of Simon's pen as he jotted down notes on a piece of paper. Simon looked up from his desk at the sound of the bell above the door. He looked as dapper as ever in his tailored suit and silk tie. Recognition flashed in his eyes.
Lanie, as I live and breathe, it's been too long.
I smiled, taking in the familiar surroundings. Simon, you're still holed up in this old place, I see. He chuckled, getting to his feet.
Old places have the best stories. Speaking of which, what brings you here?
Marcus Taylor and John Chapter. I leaned against one of the bookshelves. I'm digging around, trying to figure things out.
So you're covering that story, huh? What a mess that is.
He cut his eyes at me.
Did you get to see it? The body, I mean?
I nodded. He shook his head.
Lord, Lanie, I don't know how you do it. I could never...
He gave a delicate little shiver. So, tell me, were they always at each other's throats? Simon sighed, leaning back against his desk, his eyes lost in thought.
Those two? Like two tomcats fighting over the same territory. Never a moment's peace when they were in the same room.
I nodded, taking in his words and letting the conversation flow at its own pace. Heard a name while I was out and about. Ella B. ring any bells? His bushy eyebrows shot up in surprise.
Ella B? You mean Ella Beaumont?
He paused, searching my face.
Now, why would you be asking about her?
Just piecing things together. I shifted my weight, heard the name and got curious.
Ella Beaumont,
he repeated, almost to himself.
She was something else. Wrote a real gem of a book. It was marvelous, darling. Just fantastic.
He gestured to a display behind him.
Got a copy back there if you want one. Lots of high drama, heartbreak, good stuff. She was quite the sensation for a while.
He sighed.
But then all of a sudden she was just gone.
The way he said it sent shivers down my spine. Gone? Gone where? Simon shrugged.
Nobody knows. You've heard of the saying, here today, gone tomorrow? Well, that was her.
I pondered his words. That scrap of letter left at the crime scene took on a whole new significance in light of this news. Had Ella truly vanished, or was there more to the story? The stakes were rising. I needed to tread carefully. The shop's cozy warmth enveloped me, in stark contrast to the chill I'd felt earlier. Outside, the jazzy tempo of a trumpet solo drifted in, mingling with the rich aroma of coffee. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. What can you tell me about Ella's relationship with Chapter? Simon's eyes glinted.
Fireworks. Passion, honey.
Oh, they were close, I said, deliberately understating the matter.
Close?
He glanced around before continuing.
More than close, baby. Talk about passion, like there was no tomorrow. So much so that everybody knew about it. Lots of arguments, though. Terrible sometimes.
He paused for a moment, remembering.
Ella was kind and caring,
He looked up.
but she could be a raving bitch.
A bad temper? Simon shrugged.
Let's just say he brought it out in her.
I took this all in, thoughtful. How long ago was it?
That she disappeared?
I nodded. He pursed his lips, eyes glancing upward in recollection.
Let's see. It was the fall after her book came out. Must be going on 7 years now.
7 years. Plenty of time for secrets to multiply and motives to fester. Simon tapped his fingers on the table and looked out at me from under his mascaraed eyelashes.
I'll say this. Chapter didn't spend a minute missing her. He was with Celeste right quick.
His mouth curved in a knowing smile.
Didn't miss a beat.
I absorbed this silently, mentally turning it over. Simon, I think I'll take that copy of Ella's book. While Simon went to retrieve it, I tried to process everything. By the time he returned, I had more questions than answers.
Here we are.
He handed a slender volume to me.
Ella's one and only novel.
Thanks, I murmured, flipping the book over in my hands. Of Love and Sorrow by Ella Beaumont. How much? I asked, opening the cover.
For you. No charge. Consider it a gift.
I studied his face but could glean nothing from his neutral expression. After a moment, I slipped the book into my bag. Thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Do come back if you need anything else.
I didn't reply as I stepped outside into the chill autumn air. Ella's book felt heavy in my bag, full of secrets yet to be uncovered. Secrets that might explain a tragic end. The newsroom was alive with the murmured conversations of journalists and the clack of typewriters. Autumn's chill had seeped inside, so I pulled my coat tighter as I walked into the room, cursing the building's ancient heating system. Time to check in with the boss. I headed to Sam Delaney's office and knocked on his door frame, eyeing the stack of articles he was editing. His blue pencil danced over the typed pages, striking out sentences and scribbling notes in the margins. Without looking up, he acknowledged me.
Lanie.
I cleared my throat. Got a minute?
For you? Always. What's on your mind?
Marcus Taylor. Something doesn't add up. Sam's pencil stilled.
You think he's innocent, huh?
He put down his pencil and met my gaze, his eyes searching mine. He sighed.
Look, I get it. Your intuition's gotten you far, but remember, popular belief isn't always wrong.
I know, but my gut tells me we're missing something, and it's screaming at me to dig deeper. Sam exhaled deeply, choosing his words.
We can't print hunches, Lanie. We need hard evidence.
That's what I'm after. Evidence. His brow furrowed.
You're going to stir the pot, aren't you?
I'll base everything on facts. But yeah, if the pot needs stirring, I'll stir. He looked at me, a mixture of admiration and concern in his gaze.
So what's next?
I'm thinking of talking to Blackie. Maybe he's got something for me, off the record. He looked doubtful.
Blackie's a tough nut to crack.
I allowed myself a small smile. Oh, not always. Sam narrowed his eyes at that. And after that, I said quickly, well, I've got an appointment with a ghost. He raised a quizzical eyebrow, but then, instead of pressing, he shook his head and chuckled to himself.
Lanie Price, always full of surprises.
I winked. It's why you keep me around, isn't it? He laughed.
One of the many reasons.
The chill clung to me as I stepped out of the newsroom building, the fallen leaves of autumn crunching beneath my heels. The police station's dimly lit facade stared back from across the street, a constant reminder of the symbiotic, albeit tense, relationship between us newshounds and the boys in blue. The scent of roasting chestnuts tempted me from a street vendor nearby, but I was on a mission. Inside, the precinct was abuzz with activity, officers escorting the usual array of miscreants, clerks noisily stamping paperwork, and the distant murmur of conversations. Among the hubbub, Blackie's unmistakable frame stood out, an island of dark intensity in a sea of uniformed chaos. He glanced up from the file on his desk, his dark brown eyes locking onto mine. The furrow in his beetle-black eyebrows told me he was in no mood for company, but company he was about to get. "Blackie!"
Lanie, what brings you here?
I was hoping for an update on Marcus Taylor. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers.
Nothing new to share.
"To share?" I echoed, letting the implication hang between us. His lips tightened. Before he could deflect, I veered off the expected course. "Ever heard of an Ella Beaumont?" The question threw him, his brows lifting in genuine surprise.
Who?
"She might be connected to John Chapter," I replied. "At least, that's what that torn letter suggests." He grunted in annoyance, running a hand through his already disheveled hair.
That letter, it means nothing.
"But does the name Ella Beaumont mean anything to you?"
No.
He was succinct, his gaze unwavering. I paused, feeling the significance of the information I was about to drop. "Word on the street is she disappeared 7 years ago."
Disappeared?
He leaned forward, resting his thick forearms on the cluttered desk.
What do you mean by that?
"My sources," I began, watching him closely, "told me that Ella Beaumont vanished without a trace. Was there an investigation?" His eyes narrowed.
I've never heard of her. If she'd been reported missing, I would know. It would have come to my desk. It didn't. So?
I nodded, taking the unspoken conclusion to heart. Her disappearance had never even been reported. None of her friends had inquired after her, not even Chapter. Pushing back from his desk, Blackie sighed.
Anything else, Lanie?
I hesitated, then shook my head. "No, that's all, for now." We exchanged a long look, understanding passing between us, and as I made my way out, the brisk chill of the evening greeted me, accompanied by the distant laughter of children and the inviting aromas of street food. The city was alive, but beneath its vibrant exterior, secrets waited to be unearthed, and I was determined to dig them up. The evening was settling in, and my townhouse felt welcoming after the day's events, warm and embracing. Dinner was simple, something quickly thrown together, and as I ate, the sounds beyond my window, the occasional laughter, the distant tinkle of a piano filled the background. After dinner, I settled down in my parlor, sinking into the cozy embrace of my favorite armchair. The ambient glow of the lamplight illuminated the room, making the orange and red hues of the autumn leaves outside my window pop with vivid color. Placing Ella's book in my lap, I pulled the lamp closer. I enjoyed its golden light as I opened Ella's book with anticipation. The first page took me away instantly. The writing was intoxicating. Ella painted scenes with words that danced and swirled like autumn leaves in the wind. In her tale, there was the passionate Amelia, a writer whose heart and soul bled onto every page she penned. There was the suave and devious Charles, a fellow author who saw Amelia's talent and aimed to use it for his own gains. Amelia's dedication to her work was palpable. Each word she wrote was a piece of her, raw and vulnerable. But Charles, with his silver tongue and promises of partnership, ensnared her. He stole Amelia's plots, her characters, weaving them into a tale of his own. Worse, He stole her heart and then coldly rejected her and their unborn child. As Amelia's world crumbled, her anguish was a vivid scarlet smear across Ella's pages. Charles's success skyrocketed, while Amelia was left in despair, trying to rebuild her life, holding her child close, every moment a reminder of betrayal. The narrative then introduced Lucinda, a younger, fiery writer. Charles was enamored, dazzled by her youth and ambition. Amelia watched from the shadows, torn between vengeance and the desire to rebuild her life. Themes of love, betrayal, ambition, it was all too familiar. Could Ella's story be a reflection of her relationship with Chapter? The parallel was uncanny. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Was this a mere tale or a cry for vengeance? Could Ella be capable of murder? I closed the book, placing it gently on the side table. My thoughts were a whirlwind. Ella's story had given me more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. I had to dig deeper into Ella's past, into the tangled web between her, Chapter, and the murder that rocked Harlem. Determined, I made a plan for the morning. My next step. I'd talked to someone who knew Ella well. Someone had the answers. I just had to find them. Autumn's leaves rustled underfoot as I approached Celeste's apartment. The distant hum of the city surrounded me, a comforting background to the sharp sting of the cold on my face. The smell of something warm and spicy floated from a nearby window, a brief respite from the damp chill. I hesitated for a moment before knocking, considering the delicate balance I'd soon have to strike. Celeste had already been through so much, but I had questions, and when I asked around, I'd been surprised to learn that she was the one most likely to have the answers. When the door opened, Celeste's face held a shadow of its former self, the signs of sleepless nights and cried-out tears evident. Still, she managed a weary smile.
Miss Lanie,
She breathed, her voice thick with emotion.
it's good to see you.
Hi, Celeste, I replied gently. I'm sorry to bother you. I just had a few more questions. She nodded, her gaze distant.
Of course. Come in.
As we settled in the dimly lit living room, I took a moment to gather my thoughts, then plunged in. It's about Ella Beaumont. Surprise flashed in Celeste's eyes. Her posture stiffened momentarily, eyes widening. After a slight pause, she let out a sigh, her voice soft but with a hint of bitterness.
Ella. Yes, we were close once, best friends, roommates. But that was years ago.
What can you tell me about her? Celeste's gaze grew distant, her expression troubled.
Ella was a complicated soul, jealous, possessive. Chapter was trapped in her web for a while, but he wanted out. She made his life a living hell.
I absorbed her words, noting the pain in her voice. I read her book, I began, and there's a character, a younger author. It made me think of you. Celeste's gaze dropped to her hands.
That book. Ella had a vivid imagination. She often blended fact with fiction, but she was always good at making herself the victim.
Do you know where she might be now? She shook her head, a weariness settling over her.
No, I don't know, and truthfully, I don't want to know.
I understand, I said. I truly am sorry, Celeste, for all the pain you're going through. As I left, the sharp chill of the outside world seemed a harsh contrast to the warmth of Celeste's apartment. Ella Beaumont remained an enigma, and the puzzle of her connection to Chapter was one I was determined to solve. I pushed through the glass doors of the Harlem Chronicle, the noise of clattering typewriters and ringing telephones enveloping me immediately. It was always good to be back in the familiarity of the newsroom, even with all the questions and uncertainties swirling around. I headed straight to Sam's office and knocked briefly before letting myself in. He was poring over some papers, his glasses perched on the end of his nose.
Hey,
He greeted me without looking up.
so, how's it shaping up?
I couldn't wait to break it to him. You know the torn letter? The one that was signed Ella B? Well, that was Ella Beaumont. He frowned in thought.
Ella Beaumont, why does that name sound familiar?
I'm embarrassed to say that I'd never heard of her, but she was a big name here for a while. A short while.
Right,
He snapped his fingers.
Ella Beaumont, isn't she the one who...
Disappeared 7 years ago? Yes. I leaned against his desk, my mind racing. Ella and Chapter had a history, an intense one. She writes this heartbreaking, powerful book about her own life, and then she just vanishes. And now this letter from someone who's supposed to have been gone for 7 years.
But that doesn't make sense. How can someone who disappeared be sending letters?
Exactly. And recently, too. The date on that letter was just a few days ago. I watched as realization dawned in Sam's eyes.
Are you suggesting that Ella's been in hiding all these years? And now she's resurfaced?
More than that. She and Chapter, they were involved. He took from her Sam. He stole her story, her life's work.
And you think she might have come back for revenge?
It's a possibility. Sam leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk.
Lanie, this is big. If this pans out, it's a game changer. But we need to tread carefully.
I was about to reply when a knock on the door interrupted us. One of our junior reporters, George Green, stuck his head in, looking slightly anxious.
Lanie, there was a call for you at your desk. I tried telling them to hold. Said I'd fetch you, but they left a message.
He handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it, read it. My heart skipped a beat.
What is it?
Sam asked, sensing the change in my demeanor. It was a name and an address. Edna Bearfield. I looked up at Sam, shock clear on my face. Edna, Ella, Bearfield Beaumont. I think it's her, Sam, and this is her address. Sam met my gaze with a mixture of disbelief and anticipation. The mystery of Ella Beaumont was about to unravel, and the answers lay just an address away. The limestone townhouses of Hamilton Terrace shimmered in the poignant colors of fall. As I walked the quiet streets, burnt oranges and deep reds clung to the trees. A damp breeze rustled the fallen leaves, bringing them to life beneath my feet. The apartment building before me, a rarity in this affluent neighborhood, was elegant yet modest. I took a moment to rub my chilled hands together, then rang the doorbell. As I waited, the distant sounds of children playing echoed faintly. A buzzer sounded. I pushed my way in, found myself inside a clean gray marble hallway, and started up the stairs. The apartment door swung open to reveal a slender, dark-skinned woman with a pretty face, her thick, natural hair twisted in a braid atop her head. She wore a nurse's uniform, and deep circles under her eyes hinted at many sleepless nights. My gaze darted to her right hand, catching the sparkle of a diamond engagement ring and the wedding band alongside it. Ella Beaumont? My voice came out softer than I'd intended. She gave a single nod, her eyes filled with weariness. I introduced myself and told her why I was there.
"Come in,"
she said softly, making room for me to enter. She led me to a kitchen that, while small, was meticulously organized. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet scent of freshly baked pound cake, grounding me in the moment.
"Would you like some coffee?"
Without waiting for my response, she set a mug on the table in front of me paired with a slice of cake. Then she poured herself a cup, the steam rising in delicate curls.
"I knew you'd come."
Ella murmured, her voice laced with resignation and sorrow.
"If not you, then some other reporter. I knew you people would find me eventually."
My gaze drifted to the adjacent bedroom, where a young boy was playing with a toy train. His features captured my attention. Every curve of his face, every nuance in his expressions, was unmistakably familiar. A small, sad smile touched Ella's lips.
Yes, that's Chapter's son,
What's his name?
Emile.
Her gaze rested on him, gentle and thoughtful.
So,
She drew herself back after a moment.
I suppose you want to know everything.
I nodded, bracing myself for the story that was about to unfold, a story that would undoubtedly reshape the entire narrative of the case. The brisk chill of autumn clung to my coat as I returned to the newsroom. The leaves outside had shifted to hues of gold and auburn. The immediate symphony of clacking typewriters and hushed conversations mingled with distant murmurs of people in carriages. At my desk, I dialed City Hall, hearing the distant ring before a gruff voice answered.
City Hall Records.
I'm looking into a recent marriage license for Ella Beaumont, I began. There was a shuffle on the other end, papers rustling.
Yeah, Ella Beaumont. Married. 2 months ago.
My grip tightened on the receiver. Thanks, I murmured, placing it down. Pushing aside the constant hum of the newsroom, I made my way to Sam's office. He was immersed in paperwork, but he looked up as I walked in, eyes inquisitive. She got married, Sam, 2 months back, I said, and there's a kid, cute as can be. He's Chapter's, no doubt about it. He nodded.
So, what's your next move?
I paused, letting the scent of fresh ink and newsprint envelop me. The lively hum of the newsroom felt so distant in this still office. I think it's time, I said, to finish this up. Our gazes locked, two journalists tethered together in the hunt for a truth tangled in secrets. The atmosphere grew colder, our shared purpose taking a firm hold. He leaned back, looking out at the flurry of activity beyond his office. The vibrant pulse of the newsroom posed a stark contrast to the slow-moving secrets we were uncovering. The scent of the city, the smoky mix of coal and roasted chestnuts, drifted through the open window. As I turned to leave, I heard Sam's voice behind me.
Stay safe, Lanie, stay safe.
The rhythmic hum of the city enveloped me as I neared Celeste's apartment building. I drew in a deep breath, catching the scent of rain and decay, a mix of freshness and finality. The building door was unlocked, so I made my way upstairs. The rich aroma of roasting meat wafted down the corridor, and a distant piano lamented its solitary tune. Celeste answered the door with her familiar warmth, her eyes still holding traces of sorrow.
Miss Lanie,
she said, her smile fragile.
I didn't expect to see you again, but I'm glad you're here. Please, come in.
As I stepped inside, the aroma of fresh-baked sweet potato pie teased my senses. It starkly contrasted with the unease settling deep within me.
Coffee?
She offered, moving toward the kitchen. No, thank you. I inhaled deeply. I just wanted to double-check something.
Yes, of course. Always the reporter.
Her gaze was direct, questioning.
Still about Chapter, isn't it? Before I could reply, she motioned toward the sofa. At least sit, won't you?
Thank you, but I won't be staying long. A look of puzzlement crossed her face.
Is something wrong? Some more bad news you're here to give me?
No, nothing like that. I just wanted to ask you about Ella. I hesitated, searching her eyes. You haven't seen her recently, have you? She drew back, confusion evident.
Why, no. I haven't seen her in ages. Not since she, went away. Why do you keep bringing her up?
Well, the police are looking into everyone connected to Chapter. I have it on good authority that Ella's name has come up. They're almost certain she's the one who did it. They just need one more thing to clinch it. Her eyebrows went up.
Ella, why would they think she's involved, after all these years?
Apparently, they found something, I murmured, leaning closer. A torn piece of a letter. It was right there at the crime scene. It's damning, but not enough. Now, if they could only find the rest of it, that would be conclusive. For a split second, I saw something flash across Celeste's eyes, but she covered it up quickly.
Have they found her? Ella, I mean? Talked to her?
Oh, yes. Someone sent me an anonymous tip. We get a lot of those in cases like this. Most of them turn out to be nothing. But this one was on the money. Turns out she's been living under an assumed name not far from here. Been working as a nurse over at Harlem Hospital. Has night duty. So, she's hardly ever home, but I happened to catch her when she was there. Celeste gasped.
You've actually spoken to her?
And did she have a tale to tell? It was just as you said. Ella Beaumont has a way with words.
What did she say?
Nothing you need to hear. Suffice it to say that she presents a nice front, all right. But a front is all it is. Easy enough to see through it. I shared the information with the police right away. Celeste put a delicate hand to her chest.
That's so unsettling. Ella and Chapter had their differences, but to think she could be involved in his death?
I know. It's hard to believe. I gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Well, that's it. That's all I came to say. I just thought you'd want to know, given your history with both of them. Celeste looked thoughtful for a moment, then offered a tremulous smile.
Thank you, Miss Lanie. It's kind of you to think of me. These are such troubling times.
They are indeed. I walked to the door. I just hope the cops find what they're looking for soon, for everyone's sake.
Yes.
She nodded, her gaze distant.
For everyone's.
Ella Beaumont's home was about to become a crime scene. At the moment, however, it was still pristine, untouched. A stark contrast to the chaos the killer let loose in Chapter's townhouse. Celeste Jennings went about her work with the utmost precision. Her every move was well thought out, calculated. Watching her from just inside the kitchen, I had to admire her nerves of steel. She carefully slid the rest of the incriminating letter under a stack of papers on Ella's desk, making sure it peeked out just enough to be discovered, but not so obvious as to be immediately noticeable. It was time. Blackie, standing next to me, gave the signal.
A burst of police lights filled the room. Startled, Celeste looked up. She gave a little cry of shock, blinking in the harsh glare, and raised a hand to shield her eyes. Blackie and several uniformed officers moved in and surrounded her.
Well, well, fancy meeting you here in Ella's home, when you say you haven't known her whereabouts for years.
Celeste scrambled for composure. The innocence in her eyes was fake, but the fear, that was real.
What is this?
Blackie, twirling his handcuffs, closed in.
You're not only up for Chapter's murder, darling, but now breaking and entering, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice.
Celeste's face turned a shade paler. Her eyes darted back and forth, seeking escape. When she found none, she was defiant.
You can't prove a thing. You've got nothing on me.
Oh, but we do. I leaned in. You just handed it to us. The wailing sirens were distant, but the scene outside Ella's apartment building was a cacophony of flashing police lights, murmured conversations, and the shuffle of officers securing the area. Celeste's confident smugness crumbled on that cold autumn street. Her anger changed into a silent, simmering fury as she was led away. The arresting officers flanked her, their grip tight on her arms as she stumbled over the cobblestones.
You'll regret this,
she hissed as they hurried her past me. Nope. Somehow I don't think I will.
One question, just one.
All right. When did you begin to suspect me? From the start.
I don't believe you.
That musky perfume of yours gave you away. It was at Chapter's. Even after all those hours, it was still there. And out of everyone I talked to, you were the only one who didn't bat an eyelash when I asked about Ella. You knew I'd come asking because you planted that letter. You were the one who put it in Chapter's hand." I swear she actually growled at me. The officers yanked her away and half pulled, half shoved her to the waiting police wagon. Blackie and I watched as the back of the vehicle swallowed her whole. He took a drag from his cigarette, its smoke wafting upward and melding with the nighttime mist.
"Pride, Lanie.
He exhaled slowly.
It'll lead you to the peak and drag you to the pits all in one breath."
Normally, I felt some sympathy for those arrested, especially when police handled them roughly. Not this time. It's one thing to commit a crime, another to try to ruin an innocent life. That's a special kind of evil. She wanted to see Ella ruined, but instead...
"She dug her own grave,"
Blackie finished for me. I turned up my coat collar. The weather was getting colder. My thoughts drifted to Ella. Speaking of innocent lives, where's Ella? Blackie scratched his chin.
"In protective custody for now till we clear everything up. Can't be too careful, but she'll be out by morning."
And the boy?
"With a neighbor."
Across the street, Ella's apartment window cast a warm golden glow onto the cobblestones. The rumors, the suspicions, they'd all swirl away now, leaving her to pick up the pieces.
"Well, that's one chapter closed."
Blackie dropped his cigarette and ground it out with his toe. I pulled my coat closer against the chill. "In Harlem, Blackie, chapter's close, but the story, it's never-ending." As we walked away, I couldn't help but think that for all its gritty reality, Harlem had its own way of delivering justice. Sometimes it was poetic in its retribution. Autumn's embrace felt different as I walked through the city streets. The colors of the leaves seemed more vivid, their rustling a gentle reminder of life's fleeting moments. Cold was setting in, penetrating my coat and chilling my skin, but I hardly noticed. My mind was preoccupied, consumed by the unraveling of a story more tangled than I'd ever imagined. When the police went through Celeste's apartment, they found more than they'd hoped for. Hidden in a shoebox beneath old photographs and letters was the murder weapon, a still, blood-stained knife. I couldn't help but wonder why she would keep such damning evidence. Was it hubris, or perhaps a desire to hold on to a connection to Chapter, no matter how dark? The following evening, over the distant hum of the city, Blackie connected the dots for me at Darlene's Fish and Fry. The scent of burgers and fries mingled with the musty scent of worn leather seats.
"Turns out Chapter had been trying to break up with Celeste for quite some time."
He'd attempted to end their relationship several times, but Celeste wouldn't let go. She might have held on longer if she hadn't found one of Ella's letters in Chapter's bedroom. She demanded an explanation, and Chapter revealed the heart-wrenching truth. He'd discovered that he and Ella shared a child. But it wasn't just about the kid. The fact was, he'd never forgotten her. He'd just been too proud to admit it. But he was ready to admit it now. He wanted to be with Ella, to share his life with her and their son. The revelation that he'd married her was the final straw. Celeste claimed she couldn't recall grabbing the knife, only what happened afterward. Chapter lay dead at her feet and she was drenched in his blood. She cleaned herself up, she said, washed her hands and face, and used her coat to cover her blood-streaked clothes. Then she tried to frame Ella by leaving part of the letter at the crime scene. It was an age-old narrative. Love, jealousy, rage. Chapter's effort to extricate himself from Celeste's grasp, to be with his true family, had cost him his life. Now the legal system would decide Celeste's fate. The wheels of justice, though slow, grind on with unfailing persistence. Celeste would soon learn that. After the trial was over, the police returned the fragments of Ella's letter to her, and she was kind enough to let me read it, and she let me read his response. The mournful notes of an alto sax drifted through her kitchen window as I sat at her table. Their letters were a potent blend of joy, hope, and promises of a shared future. A future chapter had envisioned with Ella and their son, leaving Celeste in the past. Emile would never meet his father, but Ella could share the story of a man who had desired to be present in their lives. Chapter had left them his name, a tangible testament to his love and a literary legacy worth cherishing. I laid the letters down and let my gaze drift to the living room, where Ella sat on the floor, playing with her son. They were using small wooden blocks to build towers. The towers kept falling down, but each time one fell, Ella's soft voice would encourage Emile to build it up again. At that moment, I realized the strength of the human spirit. The towers might represent our lives, our hopes, our dreams, and yes, they sometimes fall. Yet, with determination and the support of those we love, we build them up again, reaching ever higher. As I watched Ella and Emile, I was reminded that every ending is a new beginning. Life's trials might break our hearts, but it's love, resilience, and the promise of tomorrow that mends them, allowing us to keep building our towers, one block at a time.
This has been a Blood Vintage Press audio production of Chapter's Bitter End, written by Persia Walker. Chapter's Bitter End is also available in digital formats. Thank you for listening.
Subscribe if you want more journeys into the enigmatic streets of 1920s Harlem, where mystery meets motivation.